Virginia Woolf famously called George Eliot's Middlemarch one of the few English novels written for grown-up people. She meant that it abandons the comforting, neat fairy tale endings common to 19th century literature. Instead, it exposes difficult, often painful truths about how we actually interact with one another. Set in a provincial English town in the 1830s, the story weaves together four distinct storylines, crossing the lives of dozens of characters. But to navigate this sprawling social web, you have to understand a singular, universal psychological flaw that afflicts almost every single person in the town. George Eliot calls this condition moral stupidity. It's the default state of being born believing you are the absolute center of the universe. To visualize this psychological trap, Eliot uses a famous metaphor involving a piece of antique furniture called a pier glass, a tall mirror. Imagine holding a candle to a randomly scratched mirror. The light creates an optical trick, making chaotic scratches appear as perfect concentric circles revolving around the flame. We act as that candle, assuming everyone else's independent lives revolve around our personal epic. Every major character in Middlemarch begins trapped in this illusion, treating everyone around them merely as supporting props in their own story. Take Dorothea Brooke. She marries the elderly scholar Edward Casaubon not out of romance, but to fulfill her own hero complex. She views herself as the essential, devoted assistant to a misunderstood genius. Casaubon marries her simply because he wants an unthinking, worshipful servant who won't question his outdated research. The collision happens on their honeymoon. Dorothea realizes Casaubon has an equivalent center of self, complete with his own frail insecurities. Her grand illusion vanishes. Then there is Dr. Tertius Lydgate. He arrives in town fully expecting to single-handedly reform medical science and sanitation. He marries Rosamond Vincy. She wants a luxurious, aristocratic lifestyle and views the well-born doctor merely as the vehicle to attain it. Rosamond's spending creates crippling debt. Because neither partner can step outside their own ego to compromise or understand the other's fears, they spiral into destruction. These marriages don't fail from a lack of passion. They fail because highly ambitious people are tragically incapable of recognizing the independent reality of their partners. In a tight-knit provincial town, this kind of egoism cannot exist in a vacuum. It acts as an infection that spreads through the community. Consider the wealthy banker Nicholas Bulstrode. His intense religious narcissism allows him to internally justify a dark criminal past involving stolen inheritances. The tipping point occurs with the arrival of a blackmailer named John Raffles, who threatens to shatter Bulstrode's carefully constructed pious image. When Raffles falls ill, Bulstrode makes the ultimate selfish choice. He ignores medical instructions and lets the man die to protect his own reputation. In doing so, he inadvertently implicates the innocent Dr. Lydgate in a murder scandal. This network graph shows how one man's refusal to abandon his ego creates a social shockwave. It ruins innocent lives within a tightly woven community. There are, however, characters who escape this cycle: Fred Vincy and Mary Garth. Fred begins with a lazy sense of entitlement. He coasts through life based entirely on the expectation of a massive, unearned inheritance from a wealthy uncle. Mary Garth serves as his reality check. She outright refuses his entitled ego and forces him to abandon his half-hearted plans to become a clergyman. Stripped of his grand expectations, Fred takes on honest, grueling work as a land surveyor. Only by doing the actual labor does he successfully earn Mary's hand. They are the only couple who secure a happy ending. They survive because they operate in grounded reality, demanding hard work over selfish expectation. The fallout in Middlemarch is severe. Casaubon dies, and Bulstrode is publicly disgraced and driven from town. Casaubon leaves behind a malicious clause in his will. He threatens to leave Dorothea entirely penniless if she ever marries his younger cousin, Will Ladislaw. Dorothea makes an ego-shattering choice. She actively renounces the grand fortune and the status it brings, choosing genuine human connection and love over wealth. Compare her liberation with Dr. Lydgate. He dies at 50 feeling like a complete failure, trapped forever by debt and his wife's vanity. Breaking free from your ego often comes at a high material cost, but failing to do so guarantees spiritual ruin. Returning to the diagram of the scratched mirror, George Eliot reveals her ultimate philosophical point. we must recognize that the surface is actually illuminated by dozens of independent points of light. True heroism is the agonizing, lifelong process of decentering yourself to truly see that everyone else possesses their own light. The world isn't saved by epic, historic heroes with grand ambitions. The growing good of the world relies entirely on quiet, empathetic, unhistoric acts. It depends on people who have overcome their own selfishness to understand others.